Hi everyone, my name's Katrina Walter and I am a knitting teacher and designer based in Sydney, Australia, and you can find me online in most places as Oliphant Cat. And if this is your first time here, then welcome. I'm glad you've come to join us, and if you are a returning viewer, welcome back. This is episode 9 of On the Needles, which is my monthly podcast, and today we are talking about everything I got done in April. So before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. So, like I said, it is the beginning of May, which is a little unbelievable. This year has been a bit of a whirlwind. I was looking over everything that I got done in April, and some of it was like, oh, did I do that last month? Because it's been a very long month. In a good way. I got a lot of stuff done, so this may be a bit of a longer episode, but we'll see how we go. I do have a cold again, so sorry if my voice sounds a bit weird. There was a glorious 2 weeks somewhere in the middle of April when no one in my family was sick, but unfortunately having a toddler in daycare means that is not a regular state of being. So my daughter and I both have a cold again, so hopefully this one is a short one. Cross your fingers for me. So I figured we should just get started because I have a lot of stuff to show you. So the first section in my podcast is always On the Needles, which is where I go over all of my whips and FOs. Okay, so the one whip that I had last month that has turned into an FO is my beanie for the Stuart House. And I have a bit of a story behind these because I have more than one now, so I'll show them to you in a sec. So I joined a knitting group on Facebook a couple of months ago called Knit Along for Charity, and I will pop a link to it down below in the comments. It's an Australian group where the admin chooses one charity to knit for every month, and everyone does a big knit along, makes some of the items and stuff, and then ships them all off individually. And I've been wanting to do more charity knitting, so it was really good that the group started, because it's been exciting to join in, and it's nice to do things as a group. So last month the charity was a place called Stuart House, which is a residential program for disadvantaged children to get whatever sort of support and healthcare and things that they need. And they were looking for beanies and mittens and sort of warm gear for colder weather for kids between 7 and 14. So last month I had this. They specifically asked for items in yellow and red and black, which are the Aboriginal colours in Australia. And so last month I had finished the beanie, but I hadn't added the pom-pom. So I popped the pom-pom on, and it's a little sad looking. I don't know, it feels a bit small. So I went up and looked up a tutorial for how to do proper pom-poms. And so the second two beanies that I made have much bigger, fuller pom-poms. So I will link down in the description below to the video tutorial that I used to make the pom-poms. But essentially what you do is you make yourself a cardboard template. And because I don't have a pom-pom maker, I genuinely hate making pom-poms. It's a long story, but I don't like pom-poms just in general. So I'm not going to invest in a pom-pom maker, but I did make myself the cardboard templates like they recommended in the video. And amusingly enough, they recommended that you wrap the yarn sort of loosely around the template to make it easier to cut. I can be not the most loosely handed person in the world sometimes. And so I think I just wrapped my yarn way too tight around the template, which made it really, really hard to cut. And it ended up cutting one of the templates into weird, pieces. I don't know. It's got all these cuts in it, and I actually, genuinely just cut a chunk off. So if you are going to do this, either buy yourself sturdier cardboard or find. This is just like recycling paper. Find yourself some sturdier cardboard, or just do what they say and wrap it sort of loosely around the template. But yeah, so these are my nice giant pom-poms. So these two beanies are just Stash Busty projects. It's been really nice having an excuse to blow through my stash. So the yellow is Manastel Uruguay Maxima, which is great because I've had this in my stash for ages and I just don't really use yellow. So it was really good to have an excuse to use that. And then the red and the black are various different yarns. I went over last month what this was, but this one was a bit silly, to be honest. So I was scrambling to find red and black to go with my yellow because I ran out of both of the yarns from this beanie. So the Maxima is about a 10 ply or a worsted weight yarn. And so I went stash diving and I found this grey, which I thought was about 10 ply, but then when I started knitting with it, it felt like it was more like 12. So the ribbing was coming out chunkier than the yellow part, and it wasn't too bad. So I figured it was fine. And then I got to the top part, and the only red that I had in stash was some BWM Luxury in 8 ply. And it was coming out way too thin. It was so much thinner than the yellow. So I figured I would hold it double-stranded, because I was like, 8 ply held double-stranded is about a 12 ply, so it should be fine. But I didn't really think through the fact that I was only knitting on 5mm needles. So knitting 2 strands of 8 ply together on a 5mm needle is probably about as painful as it sounds. I don't know what a 5mm is in US sizes. I think it's something like a 7. I will pop that up on the screen. But, so this top part came out very, very dense. It's so dense, and it took so long to dry. When I blocked it, the grey part and the yellow part blocked very, very quickly, and then the red took like all week to block. It was a little bit disheartening. And so it does have a bit of a weird shape. It's this like, it sort of expands out here at the top. But hopefully there's a kid who has, I don't know, a big ponytail that she wants to shove up into the top of the beanie. She or he. I know some boys with long hair. So, fingers crossed that someone will be able to wear this. And I didn't use a pattern for these. I just sort of freehanded it. So, this one I cast on, I think, 68 stitches, and it felt a little bit too small in the ribbing. So, for this one, I went a bit bigger, and I think I cast on maybe 70 or 72 stitches. I can literally count the stitches. So I will do that and put the details in my Ravelry project, which I'll link down below. If Ravelry isn't accessible to you, I am going to link a bunch of info in my Ravelry projects. So if you want any of that information and you can't look it up yourself, just let me know and I will email it to you. Okay, and the last beanie. So aside from the Aboriginal colours, they were also asking for beanies that were in NRL team colours. So for anyone who's not in Australia, the NRL is a National Football League. Stands for National Rugby League, I think. Anyway, they were asking for sports team colours. And I had some white yarn that I wanted to use up in my stash, and it's also a 10 ply. I don't actually remember what this is. It may be Norway from Morris & Sons, which I used on my Stonecutter jumper last year. And the blue is more BWM. I think it's also Luxury, but it's in a 10 ply. And from what I can gather, these sort of fit the bill for the Bulldogs team colours. This is just really funny. This is the only sports themed item I've ever made in my life. I know it's sort of stereotypical to make like rugby scarves and beanies and stuff like that, or just general sports themed things, but I've never done it, so I think this is appropriate. The one thing that I do regret is that I decreased too quickly at the crown. So normally with decreases, I'll do a row of decreases and then a row of straight knitting and alternate that, but up here I just decreased every single row or round. So I think it decreased a bit too quickly. So it's given it a weird shape, and it's also meant that the stripes sort of bend in too early. I wanted these to be sort of straight down the bottom and then have the crown bend in on top of them. But it's not a big deal. It looks fine. So yes, these are my 3 Stuart House beanies. So the other charity knitting project that I have, this was for a different charity knitting group. And I will also link to it down below. It's a Sydney specific group, which means it's a little bit more local. And there's one woman who collects all the items and then she brings them to the charity herself. And she was collecting items for Sydney Food Share, which are an organisation who, from what I can gather, collect food for the homeless and hand them out. And I think that they have recently expanded into also collecting just more general items. And they were looking for knits for kids. One of the things they specifically asked for was, what do they call them? Trauma teddies? They just wanted little teddy bears. And they also wanted them to be in Aboriginal colours. So I'd already pulled all the red and the black and the yellow out of my stash and I made some teddy bears. I don't know, they're so tiny. So the pattern is called Ready Teddy in a Square, which I just think is a really cute name. The reason it's called Ready Teddy in a Square is that you knit a square in a couple of different colours and then you sew the ends together to make a tube and you stuff it and then you do a bunch of extra sewing and you suddenly have a teddy bear. It's a little magical. I always forget how magical knitted toys are. I don't do them a lot because they're so fiddly. And to be honest, I hate embroidering faces. I think these two are quite cute, but this one almost looks like, I don't know if anyone knows about Pokemon, but he sort of looks like Ghastly, I think. I don't know. Anyway, his face is a bit wonky. But they are pretty cute. The first one I followed the pattern, and except that someone pointed out that I'd done the head in garter instead of stockinette, and I went back and read the pattern again and I was like, whoops, so I did. So I made the other two with stockinette heads. But with these two, I actually knit them in the round because I wasn't very happy with the side seam on this one. You can sort of see, it's really obvious where I seamed the edges of the square. So with these two, I just knit them in tubes to begin with. And I grafted, what did I do? No, I think I did a Judy's Magic crust on at the bottom, and then I knit up in a tube, and then I stuffed them, and then for the top, I just grafted the live stitches together. So yeah, they're all very cute. And the last finished object that I have for you is a cardigan. So this isn't the only other finished object that I have for the month. Keep in mind, with all of this stuff, aside from the 3 beanies that I made and the 3 teddy bears, I also have 3 other finished objects that I'm not allowed to show you because they are patterns that I'm working on as designs. So I did have a very productive month. But aside from all those things, the last finished object that I have is a cardigan for Amelia. So when I was going to stuff these, I thought that I had some polyfill somewhere in my house and I didn't. So the other thing that I was considering doing was buying some cheap pillows from either Target or Kmart and just like cutting them open and using the polyester fill from inside of those, which is a neat trick that I've used before because buying proper polyfill from like Lincraft or Spotlight is pretty expensive. But if you buy a cheap pillow, it's basically the same amount of filling, but it's heaps cheaper. So I've done that before and it's been really good. But what I did instead actually was I realized I could stuff these full of yarn. So the reason that I figured this out was that when I got the yarn for this cardigan, one of the balls had a giant cut in it. It's a bit of a long story. I will direct you over to the Instagram post or explain what happened. I'll link down to it below. But essentially someone got near my yarn with a pair of scissors and so I lost about a little over half a ball And so I had all these scraps and I was like, what am I going to do with these? And I realized I could stuff them into my teddy bears. But with the rest of the yarn that wasn't cut, I made this little cardigan. So this is Granny's Favourite by Tiki Knits, and the yarn is Fiddlesticks Pepin in 8-ply. I can't remember the name of the colour, but I'll put it in my Ravelry project. It's super cute. I asked Amelia which buttons she wanted, and I have a very large button stash, and some of them are really cute and they're pink and they have flowers, but no, she wanted these 3 buttons specifically, even though I had 3 of the blue and 3 of the red, so we easily could have had matching ones, but she decided she wanted multicolored buttons. So this is actually the first circular yoke that I've ever knit, and I can see why people are a little bit obsessed with them. They do make for very photogenic photos. Before you split for the sleeves and the body, it is just a giant circle in this really cool pattern. So that was quite exciting. I do want to make more circular yoke garments now because it was pretty fun. But yeah, it's just a pretty straightforward pattern. So you make the circular yoke, that's all lace, and then you split for the sleeves and the body, and then on the end of the sleeve there's one more repeat of the lace. The only modification I made was that I did the sleeves before the body because I wasn't sure how much yarn I was going to have. Because one of my balls got cut up, I wasn't entirely sure what my yardage was going to look like. And I didn't mind if the body was a little bit cropped, but I didn't want the sleeves to be anything shorter than bracelet length. So I knit the sleeves first, and then I knit the body. And yeah, I was a little worried about the sizing. I don't know why, but the sizing was very strange. I measured Amelia. I measured her body size as well as her arm size, both the length and the circumference, and I just couldn't figure out which size I should make. I think I especially got thrown off because the sizes have both chest circumferences and suggested ages, and she's just over 3, but when I measured her it felt like she should fit into the 18-month size, and that didn't seem right. So I am glad that I did pay attention to the ages, because I think that I was just misreading the ease or the measurements or something, because I did end up making the 3-year-old size, and it is a little bit big on her, but I think by the end of winter she's going to fill this out. So yeah, it was a very fun pattern, and I would highly recommend it. Now, the amusing thing about this item is that I mostly cast it on as a quick palette cleanser because I wanted to take a break from my jigsaw shawl, which is all triangular lace. And it was sort of funny that I cast on another project with more triangular lace. I think I just get into the mood for things. But this is my first whip, and it is my jigsaw shawl. So, ta-da! I think I'm showing you the back. All right, let's try that again. Ta-da! So this is a rewrite of my jigsaw shawl pattern, and I am knitting this in Black Wattle Yarns Blue Gum, which is almost 50-50% silk and wool. I don't remember the exact wool and I don't remember the exact percentages, so I will put the composition up for you here on the screen. But it is beautiful and shiny, and it is so soft. And it's knitting up like a dream. So I forgot how quickly a knit can go when you're enjoying it this much. So I got this far and I realized that I was like 3/4 of the way through the final pattern repeat. And I only had this much yarn left, and I was like, oh, I should pause and take some photos, because the reality of it is, as much as I hate that this is like just a fact of life for me, if I'm going to be releasing patterns, I do have to stop and take photos of them in progress for Instagram and stuff. And the weather in Sydney has just been horrendous. I'm not going to go on about it again, but it does mean that there's just been no sunshine. So I just haven't had a good opportunity to take any photos of this shawl. So I think I got this much done in about a week and a half, maybe even less. And I did that all at the start of April. And then I decided to just put it on hold for a while and make everything else because I was basically just waiting for a sunny day. So yes, this is my shawl. It's knitting up beautifully. And I do need to say thank you to everyone who responded last month when I asked if you wanted written or charted instructions, because enough people did say that they wanted written instructions that I stopped and added the written instructions to the pattern. So I'm testing those out now. They seem pretty correct. So I will send those off to my tech editor once the pattern is done, and this should be out on the 30th of May. And the last whip that I have is my Daphne top. So this is a pattern by Friday Knits, who is my friend Phoebe. She is a designer down in Melbourne. And it's for this very, I don't even know how to describe it. She said it's Bridgerton inspired, but I don't know enough history to even know what period of history that was. Old English people. Anyway. But it's got like a princessy sort of neckline and these really cute fluffy sleeves. And I've been wanting some tops for like in between seasons, so like spring and autumn. So I'm knitting this in BWM 8-ply luxury, and all I have so far is a sleeve. So this top has been, it has not been agreeing with me. So let me just show you quickly. This somehow turns into a sleeve. So if you put it on like this, I think this part is meant to, ends up being sort of straight. And then this bit is like the underarm. It'll make more sense once it's actually knit up. But it's also clashing horribly with my top. Oh, I always forget to do this. Okay, what I'm wearing, this is Lorraine's lace, which is my it was my first garment pattern actually. But it's just like a pretty straightforward top. But the nice part about it is that it has a bunch of lace here in the back. If you've been around here for long enough, I'm pretty sure you've seen this top before. But if it's your first time seeing it, I will pop all the details down below. The yarn is called Dishy. It's from Knit Picks and it's a 10-ply cotton. So going back to the actual top I was talking about. So I started off knitting this. I did a gauge swatch. I was good. I have my little gauge swatch. This is not how you should gauge swatch. Do as I say, not as I do. It's the correct width, but it's a little too short. So if you want an accurate row gauge, you should probably make a taller gauge swatch. But if you don't care too much about the row gauge, which in this particular case I didn't, then I just knit it about 2 inches tall, and then I doubled that to see what the row gauge would be over 4 inches. And so I got the correct gauge. So the pattern calls for a 3.75mm needle, but I'm a bit of a tighter knitter, so I did this on a 4mm. I got the right stitch gauge, but the row gauge was maybe like 1 row out, so I figured that was fine. And I knit the gauge swatch flat, which also you're technically not meant to do, but historically, this is why I'm having issues, historically, my gauge flat and in the round has been about the same. But it's turned out recently that that's not true anymore, so I should probably start knitting my swatches in the round as well. So the thing with this top is that it's knit about half of the top is knit flat and the other half is knit in the round. So I started out making the pattern and I was making it where I was like actually following the directions, which if you've been around here for long enough, you'll know that's rare for me, because normally I just read a pattern and I can't help but fiddle with it. I think it's part of the problem with being a designer and a tech editor. I just like keep fiddling with patterns. I can't help myself. So I was knitting it to directions. I don't want to give away too much because it is a paid for pattern, but you essentially start from the bust, knit the body, add the sleeves. So I went down about halfway through the bust, and then I am playing yarn chicken a little bit with this. So I decided I would pause just under the bust and I would hold the body stitches, and then I added the sleeves just so that I could start trying it on and trying to decide how long I actually wanted it to be and seeing if I did need more yarn or not. So I did that. I got as far as having a body that went down to about here and a sleeve, or maybe like 3/4 of a sleeve, and I tried it on and it was just too big. Like, it was genuinely, I had the sneaking suspicion it was too big at the start, and I just kept trying to persist because there's a lot of I-cord in this pattern, and frogging I-cord is not something that I like doing because I hate knitting I-cord. It's really, really pretty, but I just hate actually knitting it. So I persisted, and I just couldn't get over the fact that it was just too big. So I frogged it all. I think I had probably about 10 hours of knitting in the project, and I spent about 30 minutes undoing it all. But it does mean that I'm a lot more excited to work on it again now, because I have a good sense of how the pattern works, and also I managed to actually measure my gauge. And this pattern is knit with a lot of short rows, which are essentially straight knitting. So the straight knitting, the gauge was about what I got from my swatch, but weirdly enough, for the parts that were actually in the round, my gauge has gotten bigger. And normally when you're knitting stockinette in the round, your gauge gets smaller. So you're meant to get 22 stitches to 4 inches for this pattern. And I was getting that flat, but in the round, I'm getting like 21, which doesn't seem like that big a difference, but over, 32 or 36 inches, it makes quite a big difference. I still have no idea why my gauge is getting bigger in the round as opposed to smaller, but I think what I'm going to do, I'll finish the other sleeve off so it matches this, and then for the body, I think I'm going to just stick to the 4mm needle because I know that it was too big when I did the larger size, and I'm now going down a size. I think if I go down a size and a needle, it'll make everything possibly too tight. But I am planning on making another top in this yarn, and it has the same stitch gauge as this top does. So I think for that one, I'm going to knit the size that they recommend, but go down a needle size when I'm knitting in the round. So yeah, my plan with this is that I'm going to knit both the sleeves, and then I'm going to figure out how to join them to the top and then knit the rest of it top down. And that way I can try it on as I go, because I also need to alter the height of the bust. If you look at the pattern, there's like a very obvious like bust section. It's got the I-cord at the top and the I-cord at the bottom. And I do need to alter that length because I have a relatively small bust. So that way, this way if I do this with the sleeves, I can knit top down. I also think that there is something weird with how I'm knitting the I-cord, because I think my I-cords are just really, really loose. So this here is meant to be an I-cord bind off, and I did the I-cord bind off, and I swear the sleeve ended up being about this big. This is meant to be about a 5-inch hole, and I kid you not, it was 8 inches wide. So there's just something weird about how I'm doing my I-cords as well. So I think as much as possible with the top, I'm going to knit everything without the I-cords where I can, just to make sure everything's staying like together and at the right gauge, and then just add the I-cords on at the end. So like for example, instead of doing an I-cord bind off here, I did a regular bind off, and then I'll just do an applied I-cord at the very end of the project. So yeah, this top's been a bit of a labor of love. I don't know why there are so many things going wrong. It's totally me. It's not the pattern. Sometimes you just get projects that are like this. But hopefully I'll have more of it to show you next month. Okay, the next section that I have for you is called Off the Needles, and this is where I just talk about things that are on my mind, sometimes knitting related and sometimes not. This month it is all at least vaguely knitting related. So the first thing is that I am teaching again, which I'm very, very excited about. Ever since I started this podcast, or even just the whole YouTube channel, I have said that I am a knitting teacher and designer. That's always been my intro. And the designer part has always been true, but unfortunately the pandemic put a stop to the teaching part. You just can't teach classes when most of your classes were done in a yarn store and the yarn store wasn't allowed to have anyone in the shop. So it's taken a while to get back online again, but I'm very excited that I have some classes lined up this month. I am going to be teaching how to knit brioche, and the online class is going to be done through Making, who are the people behind Making Magazine. They started an app. They also set up a way that people can teach classes on Zoom, and so I signed up to teach a class, and that's very exciting. So we'll be going over how to knit one colour brioche and also how to knit two colour brioche, if we have time. It's only a 2-hour class, so I figure I'll teach everyone how to do one colour, and depending on how confident everyone's feeling, then we'll move on to 2 colours. So if all goes to plan, you will be watching this on a Thursday night. At least that's the earliest you'll be able to be watching it. And my first class is on the Saturday morning. So it's on the 6th of May at 10 a.m. Sydney time, which is a Saturday morning here, and I think if you're in the States, it's Friday afternoon, Friday evening, depending on where in the country you are. Obviously, wherever else you are in the world, your time will vary. I know this is very short notice, so if you do want to take the class, there is a link down below, but if you're watching this after the Saturday and you missed out, if you do want to take the class at some point, just let me know either in the comments or shoot me an email, and if everything went well for the first class, then I'm more than happy to run it again because I really do love teaching. So I am also running the same class in an extended format at the Knitters Picnic. So the Knitters Picnic is an event in Dungog, which is close to the Hunter Valley in sort of like central New South Wales. It's on every year. It's run by Hive and Gobbler, who are a big sort of like craft store and makerspace up in Dungog. And I didn't get to go last year, but I'm very excited to go this year. And I will be teaching the brioche class as well. I'm going to be teaching it on Friday and Saturday afternoon. So that's the 13th and the 14th of May. We're in May. But I'll be teaching it in a 3-hour format. So we will definitely get through the 1 colour and the 2 colour brioche. And if people are feeling confident, I'll explain how to do increases and decreases so you can do those cool like patterns that you see in brioche. So yes, if you are coming to the Knitters Picnic, or you feel like coming now after I've explained what it is, then I'm pretty sure there are still tickets available. And again, I will link to everything down below. So yeah, I'm really excited, and hopefully I'll see some of you there. I know some of you already have tickets to the Knitters Picnic, so I'm very excited to meet you all in person. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is my giveaway. So in 2 weeks, it's going to be the first anniversary of my YouTube channel, and I am hoping that by then I'll have 1,000 subscribers because I've been planning for a really long time to do a giveaway when I had 1,000 subs. So, as of filming, I have 949 subscribers, which is, it's a very large number. Oh my gosh, thank you to every single one of you who has subscribed. I'm very excited that all of you are here and you cared enough to actually hit that button. But if you haven't hit the button and you are on the fence about subscribing, I'm going to show you what's in this giveaway box, and hopefully that will encourage you all to hit the subscribe button, because once I have 1,000, I will run the giveaway. So I've been collecting the stuff in this box for the better part of a year. I will show you what's in it. This is just a preview of it because I think there's going to be more stuff. At the very least, I'm pretty sure Mel from 3 Cats Yarn wants to throw in a skein, which, trust me, you want some yarn from Mel because it's beautiful. But what I do have so far are some notions and a little bit of yarn. So this isn't even everything that I've got. I'm just going to give you a bit of a preview. So first off, I have these really cute needle toppers from Rainbows and Sprinkles. And they are there for you to stick on the ends of your knitting needles so that your stitches don't fall off. And I also have some stitch markers and a little notions pouch. So this pouch is from me. I did have a previous life where I had an Etsy store where I sewed things, and I still have some old stock, so I figured I'd give some of it away. So it's a tiny little knitting notions pouch, and inside of it so far I have some stitch markers. So these are just some nice metal light bulb stitch markers, and then I have some O-ring stitch markers that have little beads on the top, and these are really great if you do some lace knitting or if you have any knitting that has yarn overs, because the little bead stops the stitch marker from sliding under your yarn over, which is really important. And these are from Fripperies and Bibelots. I also have some hand cream. This is from Her Oily Obsession. It's just called Moisture Balm. Make sure that you moisturize in the winter, because if you don't, your hands will get wrecked from all the knitting, which mine have started to do this winter. And then on the yarn front, so far what I've got is a gorgeous skein from Ash and Eve. So Susan was lovely. Oh my gosh, Susan, thank you so much for all your support. But Susan has been letting people know that they should subscribe to the channel for the giveaway to happen. And she also sponsored a skein of yarn. So the colorway is Happen So Fast from the Summer Lovin' collection. And it is in her soft sock base, which is 75% nylon. 75% merino, 25% nylon. And I used this for a top recently, and it's beautiful. It's so much fun to work with. I also have 3 skeins of Comfy from Knit Picks. So this is in 4-ply or fingering weight. It is 75% Pima cotton and 25% acrylic. This is enough to make the smallest size of my summer meadow tank, but it's got, it says here, it's got 218 yards per ball. So even if you can't make a whole adult garment out of it, you could definitely make a kid's garment out of it. And that'd be great for the summer. So yeah, that's a quick preview of what I have ready for the giveaway. There's even more in that box right now, and I'm hoping to add even more to that in the next couple of weeks. So if you haven't subscribed, please feel free to hit the subscribe button down below, and when we get to 1,000 subscribers, I will run the giveaway. The next section I have is called Knitting Clinic, and this is when I answer people's questions. So I had quite a few questions actually. Thank you to everyone on Facebook who asked a question. But this podcast episode is getting quite long, so I'm only going to answer one of them. If you do have a question you would like answered, feel free to leave it in a comment down below or send me a DM on Instagram. I am at Oliphant, and I'll get through as many of them as I can over the next couple of episodes. So this month, Alexandra asked, what is the best way to knit with self-striping yarn? And she specifically asked later on about blankets. This is an interesting question. I think part of why it's interesting is that self-striping yarn has a couple of different definitions. But essentially what self-striping yarn is it is just yarn where the color changes along the length of the ball. Now, the reason that it's an interesting question is that the different lengths of each color determine how tall the stripes are. So obviously if you have a longer length of one color before it changes to the next color, then you'll have more stitches to play with in that particular color before the color changes. And the thing is that the width of the project you're making has a big effect on how tall your stripes are. Because I'm just going to make up some numbers here. If I have 100 stitches that I can get out of one color, if I'm making a project that's only 10 stitches wide, then it'll be 10 rows of that color before it changes to the next color. But if I'm making a project that is 50 stitches wide, then I'm only going to get 2 rows of that color before it changes to the next color. So, from what I can gather, and this may not be 100% accurate, but from what I've seen so far, when yarn is called self-striping, especially when it's on a sock yarn base, those stripes are intended to be knit for socks, which means that the color changes are a little bit shorter because they need to be relatively short because socks have a small circumference. So if the color was really, really long before it changed to the next color, then your socks wouldn't really look striped, they'd look more color blocked because you'd have a really tall set of one color before it moved on to the next one. So the problem with that is that if you then try and use that yarn to make something like a blanket, which Alexandra asked about, then you don't get the nice stripy color changes. The colors sort of change in the middle of the row. So a good example of this, I do have a solid example for you. So this yarn here is from Knit Picks. It's called Chroma. And it is a gradient yarn. And when I initially knit my swatch for this, it was quite a small swatch. And I don't have the swatch anymore, but I'll put a picture of it up here. And as you can see, because the swatch was narrow, I got a couple of rows of each color. But when I went to make the project, because the project itself is quite wide, it's a scarf, as you can see, I only got one row of the blue and then one row of the sort of like bluey purple color change and then one row of the purple. Whereas in the swatch, it was more like, I don't know, 5 or 6 rows of each of those colors. So, if you are knitting with color change yarn, you do have to do a bit of color management. What I would suggest is that if you're knitting with something that is a smaller circumference, then look for yarn that's called self-striping, because usually those stripes are intended for socks, so you'll get a good set of stripes from that. If you're knitting something like a blanket, try and find yarn that is branded or described as either ombre or gradient yarn, because usually those sorts of yarns have a longer color change. The best way of telling, what I would suggest, is that when you buy your yarn, is to actually, regardless of whether it's in a skein, if it's already in a ball, whatever, if you have a ball winder, wind it into a cake, because that way, as you wind it, you can get a feel for how long the color changes seem to be. And also in a cake, that's the easiest way of telling how big the color changes are, because you can sort of see in the cake itself the colors changing per, like, I don't know, circle. And so obviously if each of these stripes is quite long, then you're going to have a longer color change. And if it's like very, very narrow, then it's got to be a very quick color change. If you are making a blanket and you're finding that the colors are changing too quickly, then what you can do is buy a couple of different balls of the same yarn and just knit off of one ball until the color starts changing, and then use the next ball and knit until the same color change, and just sort of like try and alternate the balls as you go. Although I do feel like that sort of defeats the purpose of having yarn that changes color, because then you are still having to manage the colors yourself. If nothing is working, I would suggest just making your own fade, because that's the easiest way of controlling exactly where the colors are changing in your blanket. So Alexandra, I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions. And everyone else who had a question, I did mean to get to them today, but this is taking too long. So we'll get to those questions next time. All right. So the last section is called Up Next, which is where I just chat about what is happening in the next month. So, like I said, the Knitters Picnic is on May 13th to 15th. Aside from my class, there's a bunch of other classes that are happening, and there's a whole marketplace day on Friday. So there'll be a whole heap of vendors selling yarn and notions and stuff. So Mel from 3 Cats Yarn will be there, as well as Lisa from 1121 Windmills, who, if you've been hanging around my channel long enough, you'll have heard those names before. And there will be some other vendors too. And there's other classes on macrame and different knitting techniques. I'm very excited because I'm going to take Amelia to a class on dyeing yarn for kids. So hopefully she can make a little skein, and then I will knit up something from that skein for her. And I think she'll be very excited. I'm also going to be releasing the Jigsaw Shawl on the 30th of May. So if you want information about that, make sure to sign up to my newsletter. There's a link down below. And there will also be a discount code for it in the second issue of Yarnology, which is an Australian knitting magazine. Their new issue is coming out soon, so grab it if you would like a discount code. The giveaway video is hopefully going to happen in 2 weeks. I was trying to decide what to talk about, and I was thinking, it's the first anniversary of my channel, which I'm very excited about, but I figured no one would be interested in like a retrospective of the YouTube channel because who cares about that? People just want to know about knitting. So the video itself is going to be about my plans for what I want to knit in the upcoming months. I mentioned when I was talking about the Daphne top, I mentioned that my next project after this is going to be in the same yarn. And the reason that I know that is because I sat down recently and went through all of the projects that I wanted to do and got quite organized with my knitting queue. And part of the reasoning behind that was that I was getting a bit overwhelmed because it feels like my knitting's been really, really slow. Obviously, it's picked up in the last couple of months, and I'm quite happy about that. So I want to keep that trajectory up, and part of how I decided to do that was getting my queue all organized. So I figured I would go a bit more into how I did that organization, just in case anyone else wanted tips about like yarn management and stash management and project management and stuff. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and also about what the actual projects are, and then if I have 1,000 subs by then I will do the giveaway. So if you'd like for the giveaway to happen, which I really, really hope it'll happen in the next couple of weeks, then please hit the like button down below because that means more people will see the video and hopefully subscribe. If you would like to subscribe yourself, then you can hit this button right here. And if you'd like to see any previous videos, then there's a whole playlist of my previous podcast episodes right here. But until next time, I'm Kat from Oliphant Cat, and thank you for watching. Happy knitting!